Hello everybody. I think we're gonna just wait a little bit here until our folks gather. Hello, welcome to everyone joining us. Looks like we're climbing up here. People are joining the webinar. Welcome everybody, welcome. Hi. Feel free to say hello to us in the chat.
Hi, Tim Miller.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Tim says hello back.
I think I just saw Tim earlier. Hey, Walt.
Tim says, yes, you did. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for being with us. Feel free to
especially when you could be watching the Democratic Convention right now.
Yes, indeed.
Bad planning.
On pause.
Thanks, Sherry. Good to see you.
Hello. Yay, we're still gaining attendees here. So we're gonna just wait maybe a few more minutes before we get going here. Feel free to say hello in the chat.
Thank you, Walt, for prioritizing us. We will be your counter-programming anytime, just saying. And listen, any chat that ends in a huzzah is all right by me.
Awesome. It looks like we're still gaining a few more people. They're trickling in, so maybe we can wait another minute and then get going. Hi, Tina.
Hi, Jenny. Tracey, should we have a preview of Luna while we're waiting?
The real star of the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, Luna. Luna Santiago, Lady Luna Santiago, right?
Santiago.
Yeah.
Right.
You need to meet her only because Luna was a huge part of our rehearsal process, and she made everything better. We had dogs and babies, and it was glorious.
Glorious.
Yeah.
You're tired, aren't you? I bathed her and I sat her out in the sun.
Acrobat. Oh, she's so cute. Oh my gosh. Amazing. All right. Well, I think we can get going here. I think people will continue to trickle in as we go, I'm sure. But hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm Margaret Shigeko Starbuck, the Artistic Associate at Boston Court Pasadena, and I am joined this evening by Boston Court Artistic Director Jessica Kobzanski, as well as by Ladies Playwright Kit Steinkellner, and the cast of our 2019 world premiere of Ladies, Meghan Andrews, who played Elizabeth Montague, Jully Leigh, who played Fanny Burney, Tracey, Leigh, who played Angelica Kaufman, and Carie Kawa, who played Elizabeth Carter. I had the pleasure of being the assistant director on Ladies and had such a meaningful, wonderful experience working with all of you. And so I'm absolutely thrilled for us to be back together again to dive into this conversation about feminism and patriarchy and what it means to be a woman in the world today, all of which were themes that Ladies brought up so potently. Before we get going, I want to mention just a couple of things. First, I want to acknowledge that Boston Court Pasadena and the homes from which most of us are streaming are located on the lands of the Gabrielino Tongva people, also known as Kizh Nation, who are the ancestral, present day, and future stewards of this land known as Los Angeles and Pasadena. Second, we are planning for everything to go smoothly on the technical end of things, but please bear with us if there are any strange tech glitches. If you're watching this webinar, you cannot be seen or heard, but please say hello to us in the chat on the right side of your screen, which many of you are already doing. We're going to kick things off this evening with about 25 minutes of conversation, and we're going to read a couple of scenes from Ladies, and then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience for the last 20 minutes. And we want to hear from you with your questions, so please post them in the Q&A feature, which you can find on the bottom of your screen, and I'm going to make sure that we answer as many of them as possible. This video is being recorded and will be available on the Boston Court website, on our YouTube channel, and on Facebook, where you can find a captioned version. And without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Jessica.
Thank you, Margaret. And hi, amazing ladies. I have to say, partially we planned this panel just to kind of have a chance to hang out with these astonishing women a little bit longer, because this truly was one of the most glorious artistic experiences for all of us, and it had so much to do with the humans in the room. So welcome. I'm so thrilled to be in this conversation with you. And you know, it's not insignificant that the 19th Amendment was passed on Tuesday. We've obviously heard, if you are paying attention to the Democratic Convention, we're hearing some from astonishingly powerful women in a wide variety of moments right now. And I just wanted to see if Kit could possibly share like as brief as she can make it, inspiration for what started off the play to begin with. And then the text is kind of thrilling, and it really generated so much conversation about, you know, we are trying right now in the world to examine every system that we all operate in. You know, systemic racism, systemic patriarchy, they're systems that we all grew up with. And so one of the questions is like, what are the ways in which the system that we all operate inside has affected our lives? And so, you know, very particularly, Kit wrote a play about the birth of the first feminist movement. But Kit, do you want to tell us a little bit about how that got generated?
Unmute myself. Thank you guys so much for being here. It's a treat to be back with my cast and Jessica and Margaret. I'm so excited to be doing this. So yes, let me do the math. I think it was around 2011. I was in London and I had a day to myself. So I went to the portrait gallery where they were doing an exhibit on the Blue Stockings, which, you know, essentially you could argue was the world's first major feminist movement. I think there's a lot of caveats you could place on that, but it was a major movement. And, but the word feminist didn't even exist yet. So essentially these women were this thing before a word for them existed. And that struck me. And so much of what that meant struck me. I mean, for me, being a feminist, being a woman in the world, being a woman in a world of you know, men and other women and people of all across the gender spectrum is intensely complicated for me. And that's after hundreds of years of work has been done socially. I can't even imagine what it was like a couple hundred years ago, trying to do something before the word was invented, before the concept was invented. It felt so intensely complicated, and the idea of being like a pilgrim and a pioneer in this regard was so thrilling to me. And I'm always, I was thinking today, as I was thinking about this, doing this event about this, it's an apocryphal quote of Mark Twain, so we're not sure whether or not it was actually Mark Twain, but I still like the quote a lot, which is history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And so I thought a lot about that and thinking about these women and this play, both in writing it and working on it with the wonderful women I'm here with today. Just the ways in which the past and the present rhyme with each other and are speaking to each other, and trying to listen to the past as closely as possible so that we can build the future that we want to live in. So I don't know, Jess, I told you 2 seconds. Was that like 45, 50? Did I do okay?
That was awesome. And it's
cool.
great. Cool. It's great to hear what, your kickoff point was. We're about to share just a couple of dialogue sequences from the play, but you should know that if you didn't get a chance to see the play, I hope you will again one day, that there is a character called Kit Steinkellner who lives in the present and actually investigate and asks all the questions that the modern woman might be asking. Every single woman in the play played Kit Steinkellner. But the text you're about to hear are just 3 kind of seminal moments in the play, kind of early, middle, and slightly later, that will just give you a flavor of the kinds of conversations it kicked off in all of us. So Margaret, would you share your screen? And those of us who are not in the play are going to try to disappear ourselves so you can see the actors who are actually reading. But in this case, I believe it's all of you. So when you're ready.
You tire of self-portraits. I thought you were your own favorite subject.
Uh-oh, Tracey, I'm going to interrupt you to say, can you unmute?
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Do it again.
Do it again.
Give that line again.
Yeah.
You tire of self-portraits. I thought you were your own favorite subject.
Tais-toi, you. Yes, I have grown weary of being told what I can and cannot render. Our sex is prohibited from the life class at the Royal Academy. Men walk through those doors and are permitted to paint every inch of the human form. I am relegated to landscapes, histories, family portraits, and yes, myself. But I want to paint all that can be painted. And when I have painted enough, I want an exhibition. I want everyone to see the artist they would not let me be, the painter I became in spite of them.
This is everything I hoped to hear when I invited you into my parlor room.
It is no mistake I accepted your invitation.
And you, Mrs. Burney?
And me?
What will you bring?
Well, I have been working on a novel.
How lovely.
I am unsure of the quality.
Ma chère, how can your work not be as lovely as its creator?
I hope. I do not know, but I hope. Well, this is why I've come, of course. I dearly wish to pluck up the courage to let another soul read the pages I write by our light.
Awesome. And we're going to switch to another scene in which now Montague and Carter, will you wave? Montague and Carter have just read that novel of Bernie's and they're discussing it.
The book is good.
Good does not even begin to describe. Every word is a revelation.
The book is very good. With revision, it may well be great.
How can a masterpiece come out of such a mouse of a thing?
I am your blood sister in jealousy. For every time I read a poem by Samuel Johnson, John Milton, Alexander Pope, I feel my heart freeze over, wanting so much for it to be mine.
Yes, but it is different to see a gentleman accomplish what you cannot. A great man's accomplishments are a cathedral ceiling. How can one reach, no matter how high one jumps? But a great woman's accomplishment, this seemed more like the ceiling that we stand under now. And if I stood upon a chair in my stockings, if I stood on the tips of my toes and stretched my arm as far as it would go, perhaps I could reach. But perhaps is a possibility.
You wish to best a lady because you believe you could never best a gentleman.
They have thousands of years of history on their side. If there is a fight, it is not fair.
You do not believe you're capable of the work of a great man.
I have read your poems and Mrs. Burney's pages. I do not even know if I am capable of the work of a great woman.
I joined your parlor room revolution because you promised me the heavens. If I had known you only believed us capable of common feelings, I would have stayed in my own parlor.
Wonderful. And while that scene goes on brilliantly, we're going to skip ahead one more page in the play to even later, where the women are all arguing and Bernie has something to say.
It appears you have made your choice, and you are too much the coward to play straight with us.
I have told you to stop, and now you must. You behave as though the sky has fallen, and if you look outside the window, you see it is not.
This from you, who behaved as though the sky had fallen when we faced only whispers and no consequence.
A lady has the prerogative to change her mind.
Of course she does.
And see, I have. I will let myself be the subject of gossip and cartoon, maltreatment and abuse, whatever the sort. Because if it were not for the women in this room, the pages of my novel would be crumpled in a dark corner of my desk drawer instead of being printed and bound before the year is through. It was a dream I did not let myself imagine, but you forced me to dream it and see it has become real. I will endure their ridicule if it means I have earned your respect. You give yourself over to those who neither know nor care for you. We who are in this room, we care for you. And we will care for you no matter what is printed in periodicals. Why do they matter? Why do we not?
I say, woohoo! I know, right? Thank you for that beautiful text, Kit Steinkellner, and that gorgeous rendition, friends. I mean, that play is asking so many important questions, and we sort of, you know, deliberately chose those little excerpts because in some ways, Angelica Kauffman, who really was possibly the most successful of all these women in her time, you know, really was sort of competing in the male world of painting. And then clearly Montague is questioning whether or not she can even try to measure up. And Carter is challenging that to say, of course we can measure up. And what's really interesting is it's a comparison with men. And then finally, in the last excerpt that we saw, you know, Bernie is saying, what does the world matter? It's these women and their regard that I'm most interested in, you know? And so that's a really interesting journey from, you know, interacting in the world of men, doubting the equality of art and believing it's possible, and then saying, and maybe this is the standard, you know? So you can see why this play generated a lot of deep conversation around all of that. Anyone want to jump in with anything, even anyone on in this panel that that made you think about as you revisited this text?
It made me think about, you talk about, can we measure up or can we be equal? But after everything all the things that have happened this year and revisiting this text, I am so aware, I mean, I always have been, but in a very clear way that the standard is set by somebody else. And so you're living up to a standard that may not even be yours or may not even be true to yourself. So, you know, that's a weird thing to grapple with, you know. So you find your own voice, and it's, and you do a play like this, and you're either seen as, or you struggle to find your own voice, or you're seen as doing something in reaction to the thing that's there, not just, I'm just being me, you know.
Yeah.
I couldn't
I was
agree.
thinking along such similar lines, Tracey. It's like the mind meld of this group is just, it's so nourishing to me, because I was just thinking about how in this time, the isolation has forced me to think so much about what are my authentic values versus what have I been programmed to value, or what have I been programmed, how have I been programmed to see myself, how have I been programmed to see other people. The only live interactions we're having are mediated by this technology, and we all know that social media is distorting. So it's so much easier to see how we're projecting on each other, and so much easier to see how there are actually fallacies in our own reasoning. And it has been so deconstructing. I feel like I know less now than I ever have, but I also feel more empowered because of the work that I've done to figure out what my authentic beliefs are. I feel more empowered than ever to stand in them. And that's so exciting. And I feel like if we did come back to this script and have the opportunity to perform it again, I would be so excited to see what would come out of the investigation versus, you know, we knew a lot then, we know less and more now. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm always comparing everything in my life to like a rigged carnival game. I'm like, ugh, all these systems, like the patriarchy, white supremacy, these rigged carnival games, no one can win. And truly, I think they're bad for everybody. All these, and I'm glad that we're finally talking about how they're bad for everyone. And specifically, if you want to talk about the patriarchy, it's bad for men. It forces men to be isolated and to not be able to express their feelings and sensitivity. And I could go on and on, but it's I think we spend a lot of time talking about how it's bad for women and people who do not identify as men, but it's bad for everybody. But back to talking about as a rigged carnival game, as much as I want to blame the system, I'm the one playing the game, right? I wait my turn in line and I take my skee ball and I try to get it in that basket. And it's so scary to think about stepping away from the game and trying to invent a different system. What does that look like? But it's also necessary. We can't keep playing, and I don't mean to make light of it by calling it a game, but we can't keep participating in the systems that aren't just bad for us as individuals, but like they're not good for anybody. No one benefits from these poisonous systems,
including other species and the planet itself.
I want to draw attention to that last line of Bernie's, Jully, that you just said. We who are in this room, we care for you. Why do you give yourselves over to people who neither know nor care for you? And so, I mean, in your play, Kit, you kind of give the antidote to that. Being in a system that, doesn't really care about you or any of us, really, just the people at the top who keep getting more and more and more. So the antidote to that is to create what we have right here. And I love it. You guys are like in a heart. But it's creating a place surrounded by people who know and care about you. And that, I know we've experienced that on a lot of different productions. I mean, shows and groups of people, but it was especially wonderful on Ladies because of this group of minds and souls and hearts. It was just an extraordinary experience for me, not because men were left out, because they weren't. I mean, in a sense, they were a part of it. They were a part of the room. They were a part of the world. But to have this space be so female it was a brand new experience for me, and it was so safe. And so just as a jumping off point then, as we go into other productions, like I want to bring that sense of intuition into the next show that I do. I want to bring that sense of trust. I want to bring that sense of silence and safety into every show that I do.
Yeah, I have to say that I have never learned so much from a group of people. Um, because everyone was just so freaking intelligent. I always felt like I was chasing the words from the play, and then Jessica always gave us the floor to speak and dissect and dig deeper, and everyone was just so thoughtful and brilliant. And it was a space where there was never any interruptions. Everyone had their time to speak, and it wasn't a space where it was like, oh, good job, that was great. I mean, it was just everyone was just authentically speaking their own thoughts, and it was a space where we could just exchange these ideas and like learn from each other in response.
I will say, one of the things that Tracey, you kicked off and everyone is sort of talking about in their own ways is this question of like, one of the, we've had many conversations on the way to having this conversation, even never mind the conversations we had in the room. And one of the things that we were talking about is even dramaturgy, for instance. There's a kind of, there's a Western sort of dictated patriarchal definition of what makes a good play. And we all grew up in it, and we all, that's what we imbibed as. It's a piece of a system that is actually kind of often unconscious. It's now being called out, but it hasn't always been. And so, Tracey, your question about like, what would it look like if we were in a completely different system? It really does mean that we have to consciously allow room for, and there's things that are neat and linear about patriarchy, and there are things that are kind of messier and more circular, and Meghan used the word intuitive about about the room that we were in. And there's something really interesting about giving ourselves permission to create a new form or a new or allow new ways of making art and experiencing the world to be present.
Yeah, and I want to jump in and say, Jessica, I think intuition feels like the watchword, because it's not relying on, okay, well, Aristotle and his poetics told me like this is what makes a good thing. So does this thing I'm looking at have all those things? I feel like I see well-made things all the time that follow all the rules narratively, and I'm just cold. I'm left cold and hollow. It followed all the rules, but there's no there for me. I think the reason intuition as a word sparks for me is I think it's about trusting your gut. And even if you're not getting this sort of, consensus, or even like, no one told you that it was okay for you to like this thing or respond to this thing, you have to kind of like dial in past the radio static and the noise and listen to your gut, which is really hard to do. And ask yourself, but am I feeling? And why am I feeling? I think it just, it's a scary and exciting process to drown out the external noise and trust yourself and your own taste.
I was thinking about that too, in terms of about what Jully said about trust and what Kit was just saying about intuition, and about how a woman's consciousness of her body and how things land in her body, and comparing these women who were so corseted, and we were in these skirts where you like literally can't get proximity to each other. And just that the trust in the room allowed us to be receptive to our own physical selves in a way that is so primal and so necessary to do the work of theater. And the safety of being with all women, it creates a ground that this was a very unique experience in terms of that for us. And I think Meghan, she's here on my screen, but Meghan has had a very specific experience of her body's safety in this space that was unique in my experience of rehearsal as well.
Meghan, do you
new mom?
Oh, because of my breastfeeding?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was 6 months postpartum when we started. And it was so beautiful because, God, I was so empowered by my experience, my birth experience, where it really got in touch with, the power that makes us female. It's power. And then to go into the world in this space was such a huge gift. And I could feel my fear. I was so afraid you know, of being other, of being not accepted, that I wasn't going to be professional, you know, seen as professional, when deep inside I knew, you know, I carried this baby for 40 weeks. I've been nursing her for 6 months, and I was ready. It was like bursting with creative energy. So Jessica just giving me that, casting me, you know, Kit casting me, giving me a space to be and express that, and allowing me to make that choice, that I knew what was right for me. Because that's really what gets taken away, right? Is our choice. You could take 4 years, you could take 18 years if you want, you know, but it's your choice, mama. You get to make the choice for yourself. And I think in legislation, that's what gets taken away is, you know, they want to make choices for how we're going to give birth. They want to make all sorts of choices, whether or not we're going to give birth. So much having to do with our bodies in terms of choice just gets taken away. So by giving me that choice and giving me the opportunity to feel safe, and there was pump breaks during our rehearsal processes. Sometimes I was there getting notes.
Yeah.
You know?
And we would just identify it. We'd be like, friends, this is a pump break, so it's probably longer, you know, because, you know, standard rehearsal breaks in an equity schedule are 5 every hour or 10 every hour and a half, but pumping takes 20, you know, and so more or less, right? And so, you know, sometimes it was a 20, and sometimes Meghan rejoined us, and, you know, I think I will also say, not just that, but there's a kind of discovery process in the way this room problem solved and discussed challenges, you know, just to say there were some really fun things that Kit called for in the script that we really tried to make work. You know, there were these dummies that were described that Courtney, our props designer, built, and we tried to work with them. And in the end, we ended up deciding that they weren't working as well as we wanted them to, and not because the initial vision wasn't right, but because in some ways the production and the play had moved in slightly other directions. And, you know, it was actually the props designer, Courtney herself, Courtney Duesenberry, who said, you know, cut the dummies, you know, because we were all talking about whether or not it worked, and that actually came from the designer who built them and spent hours of loving care on our blue stocking dummies. And then in the end, nobody saw them because, you know, a play discovery happened, but it was a group conversation. It was actually a really interesting group conversation. It was not the director or the playwright or the designers, you know, no one was making a unilateral decision. It was actually a really kind of beautiful groupthink. And in a lot of places, you know, in Kit radically changed the beginning of the play at a certain point, and our discovery of how to play the play in the new or old version, depending on how Kit wants to describe it, you know, and all of that was a kind of beautiful kind of, it's sort of like decisions rose out of people not being afraid to speak truth, but everybody listening and hearing each other and then arriving at something else. Yeah.
It's just so interesting hearing, remembering some of those creative decisions and thinking back to it in that, look, as a writer, I'm always trying to put on a show on the page, you know, and like really like to the best of my ability, like not be lazy and be like, yeah, you guys figure it out. It's something. I'm always trying to problem solve on the page so that reading the play feels like a whole experience unto itself. But I'm so excited and delighted when somebody, and often when you guys have a different creative solution, it's so much better and so much more right than sort of the thing that I was kind of trying in a vacuum, because to your point, Jessica, it does come from collaboration and groupthink and us lighting up these constellations inside one another. And it's such, I mean, the last thing I would ever, you know, I would never make the blanket statement that, you know, well, actually, maybe I will make the blanket statement. I do think that there is something inherently female in nurturing each other and collaboration. And also, I will say, in that real surrender to, you don't have all the answers. You don't have to be right or in charge in this like authoritative dictatorial way, be it if you're, you know, star or a director or a writer, but you are coming to the table, bringing everything you have in the moment, and then trusting that everyone else is going to do the same, and together you'll find something that sings for all of you. But that does feel intensely female to me, in an exciting way.
I totally agree. It makes me think about the shape of the theater itself, and especially the stage that we had, which was this red stage, and just like this, the theater is a space that you hold like a womb, and we all hold it conceptually together, and it physically holds you, and then it allows an experience to come in. But it only comes in because we're all holding the space together. It's just, you know, it's so beautiful, so powerful.
Tracey, I know you sometimes talk about feeling like you're only able to be 2 dimensions of yourself as opposed to 3 dimensions. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so this came about during our conversations about this conversation. And I mentioned that when I was in high school, I had a class that basically we talked about things that were off curriculum, studied off curriculum things. And one of these things that we talked about for a long time, and at the time I wasn't even sure why, but we discussed theoretically what would happen if a 3-dimensional object passed through a 2-dimensional universe, or a 4-dimensional object passed through, say, our universe, a 3-dimensional universe. What would be seen of that object from the point of view of that universe? So if you've got this 1-dimensional thing and a 3-dimensional thing comes through, basically you're only going to get to see this little sliver of this other object, or 3 dimensions of a 4-dimensional object. And oftentimes, being in the systems that we're in, it feels like I can't be all the dimensions that I am, because only a certain sliver of me is going to be seen or accepted or allowed or heard, except for here, where I actually get to feel like my whole 3-dimensional self. Thank you very much.
I'm so glad.
You're so good at explaining that concept.
We talked about it so long, and I was like, why are we still on this week? But I had no idea that years later it would come back to me.
Yeah.
I think if we're ready, we can move to audience questions.
Yeah.
It looks like we have a couple queued up. So Tim Miller is asking us, did each of you have a scene that related to you personally, or was just a favorite scene for you for whatever reason? And he also says, by the way, the production was fantastic in every way. So thank you, Tim. Does anyone want to jump in with a favorite scene?
I loved my Kit scene. I loved being Kit. I loved being in Kit. I mean, it's not Kit's brain, but it is Kit's brain. It's a sliver of Kit's brain that we get to see on stage, amplified for stage. And being the amplified stage version of Kit's brain is something I highly recommend, because it's lightning fast, very funny, and just this world of constantly shifting kaleidoscopic concepts. And it was just so delightful to be in the theater version of Kit's brain. Like, so much razzle dazzle. I loved it.
I think the most impactful scene for me was the scene that we just saw between Meghan and Carie's characters, when they're talking about the cathedral ceiling versus the ceiling in our room. Because, you know, I feel like for me, I often feel like I need permission to reach higher, because those avenues weren't available to me, or I didn't see something that looked like that. So knowing how, like, where to reach it. So that scene really spoke volumes to me.
I loved the scene where Montague is mean to Bernie. And Jessica, you really encouraged me through our rehearsal process, because there was a part of me that just did not want to go there. You know, I wanted to be polite and nice and maybe kind of biting, but you're like, no, I think that this is a moment that she's mean, she's nasty. And it brought a lot of awareness. And we talked about this in the roundtable too. You know, one of the things that happens in this patriarchal world is then as women, just to get some kind of sense of groundedness or power, we start to compete with ourselves. But that's not really part of who we are in a deep level. So just to bring light to that because Montague is struggling with her own lack of artistic talent and her jealousy of Bernie, that it comes out in this mean girl way. And then the resolution of that is just so beautiful, what you wrote, Kit, and that we're able to find a friendship between us.
Yeah. And I mean,
it always touched me so deeply.
I think it is such a real, I mean, one of the things I personally connect to in the play is this artistic struggle between, it's what I call the Salieri principle. You know, if you know the play Amadeus, you know, Salieri basically is infuriated with God because he seems to be the only one who understands how brilliant Mozart is, and he is not given the same gift. And so I think, you know, one of the beautiful things in this play is a question about artistic jealousy and genius and, you know, how we excel and how we define success. And so it asks, you know, I don't know that I have a favorite scene. The play is my favorite scene, but, you know, but I love the questions it asks. What about you, friends?
Do you mean us, or do you mean?
Yeah, no, I meant Tracey. Do you have a favorite scene, or?
I don't actually have a favorite scene. For I played several characters, and some of the characters I played weren't even real. It was like so I played Kaufman, and I also played Bernie's husband,
Yeah.
but I also kind of played dream sequence versions of Kaufman and her husband in a way. But what I liked is that Kaufman and her husband were both people who moved confidently through the world. Like they knew what their thing was and they moved confidently in the world. But when faced with Bernie, they were kind of at a loss. Like a part of them, of each of those characters was kind of like blown up, and the systems that they themselves used to move through the world no longer served them in trying to connect with Bernie. And so I liked playing those different aspects.
Yeah. Cool. Carie, did you have one?
My Steinkellner scene, but then also I was just remembering. You don't want to hear it now.
No,
I was just remembering the scene where Carter tells Montague reminds Montague, encourages Montague in what her gift is, which is not to be the Mozart, but to hold the space, right, Jully? Yeah, to hold the space, to be the womb for the creative force to enter, and that is in its own way the ultimate gift, because no creativity can be born without the space being held for it. I loved that scene.
That was my favorite scene in the entire play, was that when Montague is like so depressed and she's lying on the chaise longue in our production and talking about being fidget and being like so, you know, sort of throughout her life so like depressed and so sort of feeling out of place. And then Carter comes in and is able, in ways that like Montague's husband isn't able to help her. Like she doesn't, he and Carie played Montague's husband as well, and then transformed into Carter on stage, and we saw the way that like Carter as a woman who had also struggled was able to like lift up Montague out of that depression and be like, no, you are special and like you are valuable, and your ability to caretake and your ability to like care for those around you and inspire those around you, which is so often undervalued in favor of this like singular genius sort of narrative that I think is perpetuated in our society. Instead, she was like, no, your ability to build community is what makes you so special. I totally agree, Carie. That was my favorite scene.
Margaret, I know you probably have another question, and two other little things. I also know you have a couple pictures in case we want to just show people what these amazing women look like. There is one of Carie's favorite scenes, and she's playing Kit Steinkellner, which you can tell by the red glasses. And then feel free to show maybe one of the group ones or all those skirts they were talking about.
Yes, the skirts.
Yeah, they're there, yeah. Yeah, on that red floor. Not like we couldn't show you pictures all day. By the way, Meghan, the one other thing I wanted to say is, you know, I think it's really important that women are allowed to be angry also, you know. I mean, apropos of that, you know, they get to be angry, as you say, not just polite. And, you know, I think people are still figuring out how to deal with female anger. And frankly, women are still figuring out how to deal with their own anger, you know, but I think that's a really important thing, that we honor all the emotions, you know?
Yes, yes, I agree. And that's what made this, you know, going back to Tracey, what you were saying about the two-dimensional person in a three-dimensional space, aside from the environment that you established, Jessica, when we all came into it, the play itself also is all of these three-dimensional. I mean, you know, the question of what's my favorite scene, now you guys are, Jully said hers, I was like, oh yeah, that's my favorite. And then Carie said, all of the scenes I related to in some way. So it was this huge gift, you know, that that helped me to allow myself to be three-dimensional, which of course you always want to be on stage, but not every play is written three-dimensionally for women.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is, you know? And can I just say the brilliance of Montague's, you giving Montague the childhood name of Fidget, Kit, you know, and then you see these women that they have to wear these clothes and these, they have to not fidget, they have to not move, they have to be total pillars. I mean, it's just genius. It really is.
Meghan, it's not my brilliance, it's history's brilliance. It's from the letters. So truly, if anything, it was well curated, but it was not my own invention. That was one of the details that was from her letters originally.
Oh.
Yeah.
And that actually segues very nicely into this question from Charles, because Charles says it can be hard to express what makes the distant past so exciting to people who aren't already interested. This play succeeded in making the 18th century into a generous time with lots to offer to people in the 21st century. Actors and director, how did this show compare to other experiences you've had with period drama? What was different about Ladies?
I feel like in other period dramas, the question is, what was it like then? What was it like for those people? And for this play, I felt like it was like, what if I lived then? What if we, real people, real women with our real experiences, were in that time? I don't know if that makes sense, but it's a subtle difference that meant the world and where that dimensionality comes from, because I'm not stepping into period costume where I'm a paper cutout doing a historical drama and trying desperately to fill it with the moment, to fill it with my own lived experience. This felt like my own lived experience was somehow baked into these historical characters. That's the best I can describe it for myself.
Yeah, that's it.
I was thinking that it wasn't purely a period, because it wasn't purely a period piece. It wasn't,
Yeah.
it was kind of a sort of period piece, but not really.
Yeah.
And for the reasons that Carie said. Yeah, and you explained why I felt that way, yeah.
Well, and actually I'll say, you know, I do think that's part of what made it feel so vivid, is because the women were genuinely transitioning from being modern women and then stepping into that story and then coming back out every so often as Kit to sort of return to modernity. And I'll just say that even the designers like Anne Claus Farley, when she thought about making those costumes, they weren't literal. They were a nod to the period because, among other things, Kit called for people to get dressed on stage and actually, you know, to really wear a genuinely period garment is a 2-person operation that could take 10 to 15 minutes if you're speeding, you know, and so there's a theatrical requirement in that, which we also kind of, Kit gave us permission because it really started in, with women in the present interrogating the past as a way of understanding more about the present. And that's one of the things I've always loved about the play.
Well, and look, I would never take it away from any other writer. That I'm sure there's some writer that could, with great photorealism, capture the past perfectly. Not only can I not do that, I'm not even sure how you would do it, no matter what I'm looking at through all these different lenses, and rather than try to fake my way through it. And I think I did write versions of this play that were more trying to fake my way through. Although I think from the beginning, I always wanted it to have like a bunch of theatrical devices. I was never trying to just completely fool you that you were in, you know, that you were, you know, had taken a true time machine back into the past. But yeah, I think once I just started calling myself on every single lens and filter I was putting on the time period, I not only did I feel much more confident writing the play, but that's when the play started to feel more and more worthy of readers and an audience. So that was, I would never put that push that process on anyone else, but it worked for me.
And I think we have time for this last question, since we're almost at time here. But this is sort of a silly question, but I kind of love it. So did each of you get to keep a pair of glasses when the production closed so you could channel Kit later in life?
Oh, yes.
I have a pair in my car, and I was regretting that I hadn't brought them to this panel so I could sneak attack with them. It was a missed opportunity. But yes, I have a pair in my car in the glove compartment in case of emergency where other people have a handgun. I have Steinkellner glasses.
In case you have to see things for how they really are. You have an emergency.
I have to interrogate this moment.
The irony is I'm actually really bad at wearing my glasses in real life, and now that I'm not driving very much anymore, I like never wear them, and my mom is watching, so I wear them whenever it's appropriate. And I don't have a red pair. Oh no, I'm sorry, I have a prop pair, but I don't have a red prescription pair, and I've been meaning to get a red prescription pair for like a year now. Like I at some point I will have that. But yeah, those red glasses, I hope they work for, if you need them, they're out there somewhere.
Oh, I will just say one of my most delicious like theatrical production tricks was all the places we had to hide the glasses in order for the women to pull them out in 1 second. I mean, they were here, they were in little pockets like on the edge of the stage, hidden behind a light. They were in a shoe. They were in, I mean, you know.
The amount of times that we were doing a run and we were like, I don't have my glasses, and we had to run backstage to grab them because we didn't put them in the right place. I mean, there was an art to that.
Actually, eventually we did store extra pairs in front of each footlight so that you couldn't notice them. They blended with the red floor, but everyone knew that that was their emergency fail-safe. So the glasses, because of the instantaneousness of those transitions, were just a fun trick to kind of make happen, you know.
Well, that's our last question. Does anyone have any closing thoughts or remarks before we're through this evening?
It's such a joy to get to see all of your wonderful faces. I just am so happy that this happened. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
I miss you all so much.
Agree. It was really glorious making art with all you amazing humans, and I can't wait to do it again. So thank you. Yeah. Thanks, awesome humans, for attending.
Yes, thank you everyone who tuned in, and thank you everyone who is going to watch later after the Democratic National Convention is through. We love and appreciate all of you, and it was such a joy to be amongst this fabulous group of women again. For everyone who's watching and who has been keeping up with these virtual events we're doing, we're not going to have one next week, but the week after, we're going to be back at it with Josh Nelson, who is a terrific jazz musician. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Bye.
Bye, everyone.